Hello, everybody. Thanks for dropping by, checking out another of my old art critique videos. So what we're doing is a series of videos where I go back and look at some of my older artwork that I've done with a more critical eye to give you an idea of things that I might do better, things that I've learned over time, and kind of giving everybody an example of how I went through the process to improve, and hopefully that can help you improve too if that's your goal with your artwork. One of the things I've learned over time, and I do enjoy sharing this with artists, is how important the critique is. So there's a difference between criticism and critique, right? A criticism is just somebody telling you, I don't like this. This is bad. This is wrong. This isn't good. A critique is when they tell you, well, here's the mistake you made, or here's where you could do better, and here's how. And I personally believe that you, as an artist in any medium, whether it's drawing, penciling, painting, sculpting, dancing, animating, acting, anything that's artistic that you do, you cannot get better at it without somebody coming and giving you critiques. So that's what I'm doing to myself, is I'm doing a critique of this old stuff to make sure that I've learned my lessons and hopefully share those same lessons with all of you. So this video, the artwork that we're going to look at today, is dated somewhere between 2004 and 2006. So again, in between would be 2005. So it was in that general range. There was an online contest that I threw, like a message board that I participated in, where you had to come up with a short story. I think it's 2 or 3 page story. You submitted it. If people liked that story, then they would go, ooh, okay. And you got votes. People voted on it, and the ones that moved ahead, right? So some people got dropped off, and then you moved ahead, and they'd say, okay, draw us a cover that would go with your story. And then you submitted the cover and the story, and then in the end, there were winners. I did not win. I made it to the final round, but I did not win. But that's okay, because I learned a lot, and again, that's what it's all about. So let me set up the art. We're going to take a look at a few pages and figure out what we could do differently. All right. So here we have the penciled cover for this project that I was explaining, this online contest. And you can see I have gone back to the well with one of my first original characters that I created, my Cosmic Man. If you saw my earlier video, I think it was my second video, I showed you a page that I did as again, just a study or practice back in about 97 with this character. So here we have the main character. He's flying in space. We have this notation here. I'll zoom in a little bit on some of the individual elements. So you can see that it says BWS. BWS stands for Black with Stars. And that is a note that you would make as a penciler to an inker to tell them, don't just fill this area in solid black, add that speckle of white dots to show that this is outer space with lots of stars. So here we have this, and we've got the villain in the background kind of sneaking up on him, and planets and sort of nebula space that would be all filled in with some color and stuff. So here's what we got. So let me zoom in a little bit, and we'll take a look at some of the individual elements. So first of all, we're going to look at the main figure of Cosmic Man. So he is centered in the page and flying towards us. Now, again, super giant jacked. This guy is built like the Hulk. I don't know that I would necessarily do it that way today, but man, this dude is jacked up. Not terrible in terms of the flying, the pose is a little weak. And what I mean by weak is, right, his arm, this arm is sort of, is supposed to show it's sort of bent. It's kind of behind him, right? And then this one is just out to the side. This is where, again, if you look at a lot of like Superman as sort of the classic flying character, you can use Shazam or pretty much any superhero character that flies. Wonder Woman flies in the comics. There are better ways to show it. This is very flat. Both his legs back together, behind him, nothing up ahead. This could have been done in more perspective. Coming at the reader may have been more interesting. Maybe one knee bent, one knee, straight and then bent and all that. And this arm could be bent better or doing something differently. It's suitable. It also, it's a very, again, if you look at the whole page here, it's very, it's not vertical, it's not horizontal, but it's not really either. And it's just sort of in the middle of the page. So again, not the most interesting composition that could be had. That being said, I think if you look at the bad guy in the background, actually, this, even though it's a lot smaller, is a much cooler pose, right? He's got one arm in front, one arm off to the side. He's got a twist, right? So this shoulder's up, this shoulder's down. I would even emphasize that more if I was going to redo it. And then you've got this twist of his hips so that this leg is coming across. Yes, at this point, if I was going to redo this, I probably would leave the back leg out, right? Like it's going out behind him more than down. And that would be done through this energy trail. You just kind of would taper that down to show that he's kind of coming at you as opposed to straight up. But the pencils are relatively clean, dark enough to be seen. There's some solid black. There is a little bit of that hatching. And this is one where I said in the last video, if you want to do just a solid black shadow on clothing or material, it's going to read as shinier. And that's okay for a character like this because he has a superhero costume of some kind, and it's like a space superhero costume. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with it being shiny. So that part is absolutely fine. So there's a moon here and a planet here. I can tell I used some sort of template for both. They're actual circles. That's good. The rings here, it's okay in pencil because it's going to get inked, and those. So hopefully, when you ink it, that line here that's a little bit wobbly, you see that it kind of goes in and out, and it's not really very straight all the way across. You can fix that with the inks, right? This is just pencil to show you I want these rings around this planet. This you could draw. So these were drawn freehand. Nowadays, I know better. I would use a tool which is referred to as a French curve. So it's just a bunch of plastic templates that have various curvature shapes to them, different not circles, but different curves and angles and things that you can use that you could get use a template. So you're drawing a nice consistent line as opposed to a sketchy, hand-drawn line. But overall, not terrible. Not in terms of a cover, like of an actual comic book. One of the things that would definitely need to be done differently at this point, there's way too much negative space down here. There's nothing here. Everything is here. You've got the planet, the bad guy. This would be, colors of a space nebula. This is stars, a moon. You have this trail of the bad guy from behind the moon, behind the character. but there's nothing here. So it's very heavy. And then if you actually do it as a comic book, you would have some sort of a title, right? You'd have Cosmic Man and the issue and the publisher, and there's a lot of information that goes in that top sort of third of the page when you're doing a cover. So all this stuff needs to come down. That's something that I would 100% have to do differently if I was going to do that. Now, one of the things that I have talked about in the past a lot is the materials. I've talked about the paper. This is, again, a different brand of this lined paper, but it's still the same idea. You've got this, Strathmore is a manufacturer of Bristol board paper, which is this thick paper that we use. This still has the same blue lines that tell you, where things need to go. If you're going to have word balloons and text, it's got to go inside this dotted line. Here's the outside border. There's a few little tick marks here that show you like this is sort of a third, a third, a third. Here's a halfway mark if you want to use those to help kind of orient your page. I think it even tells you, I thought it said the size, but I could be wrong. Anyway, we know it's all 11 by 17 pages. So there. As far as the pencils go, I haven't talked about pencils when in regards to the materials and what's the right stuff to use and what's the wrong stuff to use. This is my opinion. When it comes to actually penciling on the page, there is no wrong choice. It's whatever you like. So I tend to use kind of a middle of the road, slightly harder pencil lead than what you would get, at the for school supplies. That is what's referred to as a 2B pencil. And a 2B pencil, the lead is softer, so it's going to be darker. The downside to doing dark pencil lead like that, or soft pencil lead, is I'm a lefty. And so when I'm drawing, more often than not, my hand is dragging across the pages. I've actually learned that I oftentimes, if I'm going to do a real full pencil type of thing, I'll work actually kind of backwards. So I can't draw it panel 1, panel 2, panel 3 across, because if you use a soft pencil lead, my hand is literally just going to smudge it, and the whole page just turns sort of gray. I actually will work sometimes. I'll work from top this way to this way, so that as I'm drawing, I'm not dragging across. Sometimes this way to this way, but always sort of that right to left as opposed to left to right. But if you use, like, this is a little bit of a harder pencil lead, it's not going to smudge. You take your finger and you go like that. It's not going to smudge nearly as much. So this is probably more like a 2H type of pencil, where you can still get it dark enough that you can see it, and you can see in the black areas, but it's not so hard that it's going to, or it's not so soft it's going to blend, it's going to smudge. It's not so hard that it's going to dig into and cause you to kind of rip into the paper. Actually, that's if you go to like 4H lead, it's very, very hard lead. The line is super, super light. You can hardly see it, and you will dig into the paper. So when you if you want to erase anything, you will have indentations in the paper from the pencil. Okay, so that's the pencils. So then from there, I had gotten enough votes to move. I apologize. I don't remember if I had to do this. I think I had to do the story first and then the cover, but I'm showing you cover first and then the story. But that being said, to go ahead and show the ink version. So then what I did is I inked it, and you can see there's some differences here. So one of the things I did is I added sort of these asteroids down at the bottom, because either I had gotten feedback on it, or I recognized, hey, there's too much dead negative space here. It doesn't work. So that's possible. There's also a couple of other changes that are, there's one in particular I can really see it's very subtle, and that is it? I was going to say this. So the way that the costume comes up, the boots and sort of the inside of the legs is supposed to be yellow. This outside part where there's the dark shading is red. This part on his hip here in the pencils looked too low to me compared to this other side. So I think I kind of, if you compare them side by side, I think I did. Yeah, so I raised this up a little bit and probably lowered that to kind of match that up a little bit. But this is the inked version. And you can see I did not add the stars because there's a couple of ways you can do that. One, you do it in the computer. And in fact, if I remember correctly, like the next stage was to color. And I think I did color this digitally using like Photoshop, and that's where I added in the stars. If you want to do it black and white, what you do is you have to cover up the parts you don't want to get white ink on, and you have to take either white paint or white ink, and you can use like a toothbrush or any kind of like a bristly brush, and you sort of flick it. You take it and you go in, and just like taking your finger down a comb, and you go, and those little bristles will flick little tiny random dots of white all over the inked parts, and that will create your star pattern. That's random. If you try to do it by hand making dots, it doesn't look random. The size is all the same. It's impossible for a person to truly be random the way stars are. So it ends up kind of, you can see patterns. So if you truly want random splatter dots is the way to do it manually. Otherwise, you do it in the computer with Photoshop. You can import brushes that will do it for you. Otherwise, these are, now again, the black, if you watch the last video, I talked about different inking techniques and different things. I'm still using pens. Everything I ink is always pens for the most part. Every once in a great while, I'll get the bug and I'll break out my Crow Quill pens and I'll dip it in ink and I'll ink something like that. But almost all the time, this is done with the technical pens or the Micron type pens. But the solid blacks here may have been colored in with like a Sharpie or something to that effect. And again, you can see it because you can see there's different shading to it almost. Like if it overlaps, it's darker, some of it's a little lighter. But again, all things that if you're going to scan it into a computer, you can fix it. You can adjust the black and white, and nobody ever sees. So the only time that Sharpie solid black areas are a problem is if you want to collect original art and you want to put this on a wall and you want to show it forever, the black ink will fade over time. So not a lot to talk about as far as the composition because it's exactly what we saw in the pencils. I haven't changed anything. I've just gone in and inked it. And so being the penciler, I didn't add or change a lot. Actually, so here's one of the things I did do. It was very obvious, which I didn't point out in the very beginning. I moved his leg. So obviously I was smart enough or got enough feedback or critique to go, this is boring. This is weird. What happens if I move this leg down? And that little bit really does help, I think, the composition of that figure. We should have done something. I should have done something different with the arm or with this arm maybe or something. But this leg coming forward is much, much better than the leg just going back. Definite big difference. I've added some rendering, some of this line work to show basically that there's light from somewhere. not really sure where, but he's sort of casting his own shadow on the cape that's behind him. So I've added some shading to that cape. Also, you see the cape here. It just sort of flows back and it's very square. There's not much to it. Here, I've added some of that where it's bending and rippling and floating as a cape. In terms of the villain, he looks pretty much the same. The moon, I just rendered it out. So if in the pencils, I just drew some circles for craters and some lines indicating where I would shade it. And here I've gone in and done more lines, which is supposed to be the dark side of the moon, I guess, and then a lot more craters in there. And of course, the asteroids were a big deal. So that's some of the big differences there. The shading, the change in the leg is big. Now, how did I do it? Right. So I have this isn't a copy, right? I drew it on this page and I inked it on this page. So how did I do it? So one of the tools that people nowadays, you would just do this in the computer. I would scan the pencils here, print that scan. I would change the color of these in the computer to this blue, the same color as what's on the paper, this blue color. Print it on a new blank piece of this board, and then ink over the blue. But there's no blue here. That's not what I did, because I didn't have a printer that could handle this kind of paper. The only kind of printer I had handled, printer paper, 8.5 by 11 printer paper. I didn't have a printer big enough to do this. So how did I do it? So the other thing that you can do that a lot of pros will use is called a light box. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It is a box that has a lamp inside and usually some sort of clear or opaque, slightly opaque plastic. And you put this on top of it and you shine light up through it. You put the other blank piece of paper on top and you trace your own work onto this new piece of paper, and then you ink the tracing. So that is what I did, sort of. I didn't have a light box. It's something I have now. You can buy them. They're at art supply stores. They're fairly inexpensive. When this happened, I didn't have it. I was still, I was kind of struggling to get through and couldn't afford a light box. But here's what I had. I had a coffee table with a glass top. What I did was I taped this to the glass. I taped the other new piece of paper on top of it. I got a desk lamp, put it underneath the glass, shining up through the coffee table, and turned my coffee table into my light box. Traced it, and then took the tracing, brought it to my art table, and inked it. Yeah, sometimes you got to get creative. Sometimes you got to think out of the box. And that's what I needed to do so that I could have two of the basic, the same thing, both on the right size and type of paper. And that's what I did. So I'm going to get to the story here. So here we have the establishing shot. And again, this is not a story that somebody else wrote in a script. This was just a couple page story for this contest. And there was no parameters of what the story had to be. It just had to be kind of interesting. That was it. So I've got this sort of landscape. You could tell there's smoke, there's fire, there's bodies, there's stuff has been going on. This is a war zone. Now we see this guy. We've seen him on the cover. We know he's the bad guy, and he is just blasting through these armored soldier guys. And now these guys, there's a bunch of them. They've got all kinds of different weapons. This guy's got like a shoulder cannon. This guy's got a gun. This guy's got a gun. This guy's got like 2 mounted backpack guns. And they're telling the guy like, hey, we've got you surrounded. Give up. And they shoot at him, but whatever his powers are, it just reflects all the shots. Nothing is hitting him. And then he flares out with his power, and we see the top down. He's yelling into the into the nether. Nobody can stop me. And you can see the ground around it has been scorched, and all these guys are just laying there, done. So this bad guy is just cleaning house. Pretty decent establishing shot here. I'm going to zoom into the panels as we go through the panels. Not a bad establishing shot. I would say it could use some more foreground elements maybe to help do depth. So there's a rock in the foreground, and there's like a figure, there's like some legs or something in the foreground, but definitely could use something to kind of break it up. Maybe another rock, a head, something in that foreground to help build that space more than just a horizon line of sort of shaded out mountains. This smoke rendering, I don't like it. You can see, if we zoom in here, you can see that it's just lines. So the black isn't black, and then these lines are supposed to help fill in that darkness. I don't know why I didn't just make the black smoke, right? If it's going to be black, make it black. Don't, right? There's other black shadows. Don't, I guess I was trying something with a technique, if you will. But if this was to get colored for a comic, any of the little white spots in between that would be colored with some sort of gray or whatever smoke color I wanted, it's not going to show up. So it's there's too many lines to be colored. There's not enough lines to be black. It just sort of fits in the middle and does nothing. So not really keen about that. This middle ground, I guess, is what I'm saying is the middle ground. This all could have been up higher. You don't have to have your foreground at the panel border. And that's something, again, is easy to struggle with. I'd say there are times when I remind myself of this to this day. Your foreground does not have to be the bottom of the panel. Your foreground could be here. Your middle ground could be here. Your background could be here. All this space of sky, unless I am going to put dialogue boxes in here, is unnecessary. It's just wasted space. This part, pretty standard. I like, you can see, so whatever energy he has is the light source, so it's real strong, right? So the shadows behind them is very, very heavy. I like that, how his blasts are coming through them, and you can see the cracks as it's blasting through the armor. I dig that. No real problems with this. I think it's pretty clear. It tells you what you need to know, that this dude is wrecking people. These guys with the armor, again, kind of a neat design. Pretty simple. I think that was the idea, was when I did it, it was like, just kind of keep them a very simple armor. It doesn't need to be elaborate and crazy. One thing I would say, which I do it certainly a lot more now, and again, I don't consider myself a great inker. I don't necessarily follow a lot of the not rules, but I don't do things that great inkers would do. Let's put it that way. There are people who do amazing work. That's not me. But what I do is I will use thicker line weight to separate components or elements in my pieces. And so here what we've got is there's a little bit of a thicker line around this guy, but it's not thick enough that helps pop him out and really separate him from the background, and vice versa. So like this overlaps this guy, and this here overlaps this guy, but you can't tell because the shapes of the armor and stuff are all the same, and there isn't a thick enough line, in my opinion, to help break those out from one another. So there isn't as much depth here. They all kind of blend together a little bit, which I don't like as much. This part where the lasers. So they've all shot their lasers and it's all bouncing off. Cool. Maybe a little static. Even though it's supposed to be action, you can see all the ricochets and stuff. Thinking back on it now, I think what might have been cool would be to show the super guy, the bad guy here from the back, right? Maybe very close or fairly close to the camera towards the bottom. Have the space guys here, the armor guys here in the foreground, and show them shooting him and all the lasers bouncing off. I'm assuming you understand. These are guns, right? These are guns. These are lasers. They've shot. I don't assume. Just show people. So showing the guys actually shooting and having them bounce off, I think would possibly be more effective. I like this as a panel breakup, right? So it is the panel border between the two panels. I do like that as an element. I think that works pretty cool. The energy and stuff coming off him is pretty neat. The one thing I would say though, I don't know. So I like that he's not the same size. I would say if he was the same, if he filled up this space in the middle, then it's almost the same size as all these other figures throughout the page. That doesn't work. So I like that it's smaller, but then you have this smaller version of him in the next panel so that you can really see everything. You see all he's floating above, and here's all these the dead guys that he's just obliterated with his power. He needs to be bigger in this space here, really closer to the camera, especially his face. And then that's really going to show how he's up above, and it's going to vary the size of the figure throughout those pages. So that's what I would do differently there. But overall, I think the action of it reads. I'm not super unhappy with it. There are definitely some changes that could be made. I will point out a lot of the. I like the anatomy of the arm here. You can see the shoulder, the bicep, the tricep where it connects to the elbow. I like that. That's actually pretty good. This figure's anatomy much better than what we saw in 97. Same character, but a much better figure overall. And then here we'll zoom out to see the whole page again. And here we see that in his excitement and he's enthralled, boom, he's blasted with some sort of energy now this time as well. And he's like, so he's hit. And here's the reveal of our hero. He has come. He has blasted. You can see because his hands are smoking from the energy that he blasted him in the back to try to stop him and stop his rampage. And then the guy, so he spins and he's got some sort of course, snarky remark, I'm sure. And now he shoots off towards our hero and collides with him and carries him off the page. Okay. So a couple things. One is that, again, we'll zoom in as we go through the panels here. I'm okay with this part. I think we've seen this guy enough that even though I've silhouetted him because the energy's hitting him from behind, you recognize who it is, right? This is the bad guy still. He's got the star in the middle, the star on his face. Boom. I'm not sure if it reads that he's being shot as opposed to maybe he's just radiating more energy. And again, I wouldn't want to rely on like the dialogue to explain it. So maybe instead of just this sort of the dots as energy, this is one where you could really get more of an explosion type of element behind him, and could even twist his body more to really show the impact that he's getting hit from behind. So that's an option. Could even, and it's I'd have to mess around with it to see how it worked, but you could even maybe turn him instead of being at the camera and getting hit and towards the camera like he is. If you made him 3/4 and he gets hit and he's you would see more of the bend of his body. You could see the blast coming and hitting him. That might be a better solution. Again, I do like the way that I've laid it out in terms of here's a panel, a traditional square panel, and then there's no panel. And this guy bleeds into, right? He carries over into these other pages. He is sort of his own panel. I like that. I can tell you, I definitely messed up on his head. He's got this giant egg of a head. I don't know why. That's weird. Here, so what I've chosen to do, I like the smoke. It creates movement along with his cape. So you can see, right, the cape is bending this way. This needs a lot more lines. These weird things. I don't know what that is. It's supposed to be some sort of folds. Doesn't work as folds. And I would just do the cape straight. I don't know why it bends down and out. That is also weird. But the idea, right, is that there's motion. There's wind or something that's blowing it that way, blowing the smoke, blowing the cape. So to show the energy that surrounds his hand, I've drawn his hand as this kind of funky black shadow. I've done the same thing here, but I've added in all the space sort of around it as well, instead of just his hand. And I don't know that that works as well. I think just a circle, and his hand should be in the center of the circle. It's way offset. But in the center of the circle is the hand. Just draw the fist, maybe again, the shadows of just the fingers, and leave the rest out. And the energy, you can't see through it, and just draw the rest of the figure through it, behind would be okay. So there's some changes and some things that I definitely would do differently, but I like that concept of using a different way of showing a character in a border that isn't just, like, I could have just drawn this as a long rectangle and fit him in there. I like how this plays over the top of stuff. This one, again, he's supposed to be very close to us, and for some reason, I did not emphasize that with the outline. There should be thicker lines on these contour lines of him, right? The smoke, all this stuff is in front of the rocks and things in the background, but they all have the exact same line weight. This line that comes down his bicep is as thick as this line, is as thick as that line, is as thick as that line, and it should be different, and that helps set again the depth. Maybe not quite as big of a smoke cloud coming from his back. He got hit, but his back isn't, there's not a hole in him, so maybe that should be a little less. So yeah, the hair needs some work, right? It's just sort of these big chunky triangles, as opposed to hair that flows. I think you can get away with it, again, because it's sort of sci-fi. We don't know, is this guy an alien? Is he a human? We've never seen what's underneath. He built like a person, but all we know is that he has hair. So we don't know if he's really a person or a different kind of alien or something like that. So you can kind of get away with that. Here, him zooming forward and the energy kind of wrapping around because he's blasting at you fast. Again, I don't mind this one as much. Here's what I would say. So I talked before, just a few minutes ago, about how I like this breaking the borders and sort of being up front and creating almost depth on the page between what the panels are. I do like that. Here's where it's a small problem, though, because the foot comes down here. I can't really draw this guy bigger coming, so his head bigger and really emphasizing that foreshortening of him coming from the bottom this way. That might work better if his head was bigger, if his shoulders were bigger. maybe his fist, instead of having both his arms down at his side and bent at the elbow, maybe one of the fists pointing right at you at the reader. He's shooting for you. In fact, in the very next panel, if you look at these silhouettes, you can see, right? So this is the bad guy, and basically he's shoulder tackled him. So he does have one arm forward. So why don't we show one arm forward? A big fist in the foreground would have brought a lot more action, but it's hard because I've put that foot there. So maybe still doing this where it breaks the panel, breaks the borders, but just shrinking him down just enough so that foot just kind of breaks the top a little bit might have been a better choice. Again, here this is the foreground. He's taken off from here. This is the backlash of the energy, right? Pushing against the ground. He's broken the ground because he's blasted off so high. I like this emphasizing where they've actually connected and then zooming off. I like the energy part of it. That part all seems cool to me. The only thing, again, your foreground doesn't have to be the panel border at the very bottom of the panel. It could be up higher, right? It could be up here, and then there's plenty of room. And this, again, becomes a lot of dead space here. I like the storytelling. Now, here's the other part of it, and this is where it becomes a little difficult. This really reads, so it's the right way because we kept consistent with our character. This guy's always facing the same direction. We've emphasized he's been hit from behind. So everything that he's done, he's facing that way. He gets hit from behind, which means our hero is now to the left. The bad guy's on the right. So when he zooms to get him, he has to go from right to left. But, and this is more of almost like a psychological thing that you have to understand as you're doing your storytelling. In Western storytelling, everything goes from left to right. And you want to bring the eye. This is an important step in storytelling in a reverse. It's like a Z pattern, right? So we always read from left to right and across and down. So you want to bring your eyes this way, this way, this way, this way, and that takes you to the next page. So this is really backwards. Now it fits because if all of a sudden I show them going this way, then the direction is wrong, right? Because the whole time our bad guy has been facing this way and he got hit from behind and he turns around and he goes to get him. So you'd be breaking a rule about that direction. It wouldn't make sense for the story. But from moving your eye in the composition of the page, this is wrong. So there's a couple things that happen there. One, it either tells you sometimes you have to break the rules, and that's okay. If it makes sense for the story and it makes sense for what you're trying to do, sometimes you can break the rules. The other thing is it tells you maybe there's a better way to tell this motion that still brings you in this direction so that it would move you to the next page. Now, there is no next page, but again, if you're telling a story that was actually that way, it would move you from left to right and onto the next page. So stuff to think about. There's a lot to take in when it comes to telling a story. It's not just about cool punches or action scenes or how many lines you draw on the page. It's important to know about all these other storytelling factors, about moving somebody's eye through the page, making sure that you don't disorient them by changing somebody's direction all of a sudden. There's a lot of that stuff that you need to take into consideration as well. So, and as you can see at this point, again, probably about 2004, 2005, it's something I'm still working on figuring out at that point. So, and the mistakes I pointed out are probably why I didn't win this online contest. It didn't there was enough mistakes that people liked it. They thought it had promise, but it just wasn't quite there. And I agree, it's not quite right there. So that is this video for now. I thank you for checking it out. Again, I hope that you've enjoyed it. And as we get ahead, you're going to see more and more of my work is now where I'm inking myself. There's a few more pencil pieces, but I'm going to be moving more into a phase where I'm inking my own work. And we're going to see less about talking again about the materials like the paper and the pencils and the pens that I'm using, and more about how now I've got a lot of the basics down and I'm starting to get into the minutia of storytelling and character design and perspective and foreshortening and more of the complex elements that come into drawing comics. So I hope you'll join me for the next video. I'm very excited that is coming up, and we'll be looking at a few pages from what will be actually the next full comic book that I completed, and again drew completely, pencils, inks, the whole 9 yards. I drew from start to finish. So it's gone from 87 or 88 from the first comic that I drew from start to finish to now. This other one is going to be probably 2006 to 2007 area pages. So quite a while, almost 20 years from the very first comic I made to now the next full comic I made. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoy these videos. If there's anything, if you have any questions or anything in your own artwork that you're struggling with and would like some help with, drop a comment. Let me know. I'd be happy to take a look and help you out, and hopefully these videos are doing that as well. So thank you, and I'll be talking with you all soon.